there's no customer incentive. That's not quite true. There's no customer incentive beyond I support this makes me feel good, I think ethically this is cool. That is a small incentive, but there is no real financial incentive for me to go and do this. Okay, some of our businesses offer special offers, but it's limited. We've definitely encountered some resistance to the scheme from some businesses. We've also encountered resistance from some demographics. It's very interesting when you go and talk to people. You find that in different communities, Brixton is very multicultural.
Sorry to interrupt. Is that anyone's bike chained to the gate out there? Because it keeps getting like, it's getting a bit manual. I thought it was someone who was in here, sorry.
Yeah, so Brixton is a very multicultural area. It has traditionally it's been a very strong Afro-Caribbean population. It also has a sizable Asian population, Portuguese population, and so on and so forth. One of the things that we find is that different community groups and demographics have very different attitudes to it. Asians in particular tend to be very, very suspicious of anything that's not cash. We've found many Asian-owned businesses who refuse point blank to credit cards, and they're certainly not interested in the show for Brixton Pound. So there's plenty of resistance amidst all the positivity. So I didn't give you the figures at the start, but the Brixton Pound currently has about 200 businesses in the area who accept the Brixton Pound. I think there's probably 2 or 3 times that many businesses that we could target. In terms of demographics, yeah, sometimes people have accused the Brixton Pound of being a sort of white middle class initiative. There have been some jokes around the fact that it's only useful if you want to buy organic olives. That may well be fair comment. Again, how far you can push these schemes and get wide take-up depends on many things. Really, you have to reach a kind of tipping point. Okay. So, when we reflected on all of this about 18 months ago, we thought, what can we do that will try and help push this forward a bit more? And we felt that we really needed to innovate and come up with something that was more convenient than cash. We had to accept that basically people don't use cash very often. I'm sure most of you in this room are probably just using a credit card or debit card for a transaction is second nature. I don't know how many times you get to that situation where you go out with no cash at all. Certainly only for me it happens often. So the obvious thing is to launch an electronic payment method. Something that's more convenient for customers, so they don't have this double burden of having to go and get sterling and then exchange into another currency. For businesses as well, particularly micro enterprises and market traders, giving them a cheaper alternative to accepting credit cards, we thought could be quite potent. It's not cheap as a business if you want to take credit card payments, because you probably need a separate phone line, you need to rent a credit card terminal, and then of course you're paying whatever percentage of each transaction back to the credit card broker. So there's quite a few costs there. If you're a one-man band market trader, there's no way you can justify that. But what we were able to offer with the e-currency is a scheme that requires no hardware. There's a small transaction charge, but you don't need a phone line. All the traders need is their own mobile phone and the ability to receive text messages. Having an e-currency gives you the possibility of playing around with currency models in a way that you just can't do with cash. Let's say, for example, if we wanted to penalise people who are going to exchange the Brixton Pound back into sterling, and we want to charge them 10p every time they do that, that's a total nightmare with cash, because we've got to go around to all our exchange points and make sure that they're actually willing to have staff who are trained to do this, and it creates a real admin burden. With an electronic currency, of course, you can program this into the design of your currency and have a bunch of web service do the work for you. So that then means that you can innovate and experiment with all sorts of ideas. And I'll tell you a bit about the model we've gone for in Brixton in a second. The other thing that is immensely valuable about an e-currency is that you can track what's going on. And so remember I said earlier that we have no idea how often our notes are recirculated. So we can see how many go out each week, we can see to a limited extent the ones that are being exchanged back, but we don't know what journey those notes went on in between. We don't know if they circulated through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, how many businesses. With an e-currency we know every single transaction. And it's given us an amazing ability to be able to see where people are using the Brixton Pound, which businesses are getting the most transactions, and so on. And that's really valuable for us to try and see where the holes are. Also to look at which businesses are accruing a large balance, and maybe we need to go and have a chat to them and team them up with somewhere else that they can re-spend, and so on and so forth. So let's have a look at the model that we've used to drive this. Basically, all users have an online account. It's a bit like online banking. But once people have signed up, they don't actually really need to go near a web browser because you can do everything from your mobile phone. You don't need a smartphone. We deliberately did not want to exclude people who don't have smartphones. So it's all text message based. You can use a text message you send a text message to the business when you're standing there if you want to buy something, or you can send another text message if you want to know what your balance is, and so on and so forth. When customers transfer money into the electronic Brixton Pound account, they get 10% bonus. So if I put in £10, I get 11, put in £100, I get 110. The usual question that people ask when you tell them that is, who's paying for that? How's it funded? And the answer, in a sense, is no one's paying for that. That's new value that's created in the system. And that 10% bonus, basically we only have to get that 10% bonus back if that credit is changed back into sterling, because we need to make sure that we always have enough sterling to back whatever's circulating in Brixton pounds. So the way it works, just to go to my bottom bullet, if businesses want to exchange back into sterling, so if they can't find any way of re-spending their credit with other businesses, then they have to pay a 10% hit. The technical term for that is a malus, which means an exchange tax. So if businesses exchange back, then they have to cover the cost of the bonus. But of course we don't want to exchange back, and the scheme is all about making sure that they keep that credit recirculating. The advantage of this model is, on the one hand, you have an incentive for customers that goes beyond the feel-good factor. You're offering them a tangible benefit if they sign up and use electronic Brixton Pound. You're also giving businesses a disincentive to exchange back into sterling. And we've definitely found businesses are being a bit more creative now in looking at how they can use spend. So we had a business just the other day who had a large balance, and they discovered that their web designer was a user of the pay by text system, so they just paid him in electronic Brixton pounds. There's a small transaction charge that businesses pay on every transaction, so it's very similar to credit card payments in that sense. Obviously there are costs of sending text messages and running web servers and so on, so that's our way of making sure that we're very hopeful that this year we'll be able to announce that that's up and running. We're also working with Lambeth and other large employers to roll out a payroll integration scheme. This should go live with Lambeth in June, and basically initially all members of Lambeth staff, and there are over 2,000 of them who work in Brixton, will have the option of receiving a small proportion of their monthly salary directly in electronic Brixton pounds. Then we're going to roll that out to other large employers, so we think that is going to give a real boost to the scheme. We're also working on a smartphone app for pay by text. While we think it's very important to always have the kind of low-tech text message version, lots of people have smartphones and lots of them will ask us why we can't make it a bit easier for them. So we're hoping to launch that in the next few months as well. At the moment, the pay by text scheme only has one method that you can get credit into it, and that's by doing a bank transfer. So in a couple of months, we're also going to be rolling out a way for people to use PayPal or a credit card transaction, with the idea that there's a bit more immediacy to it. You can sign up and put credit in immediately, and then go out and spend using it on your phone. So that's what's coming next. Okay, I think this is my final slide. So yeah, do try this at home, and do try this in Deptford or anywhere else, but here's my advice. Cash-only schemes are extremely limiting. I think most of us at the Brixton Pound almost wish that was not again. They're often just too much effort and too difficult for people to continue engaging with. So I would think very carefully about having something electronic as well. If you want people to use this stuff and not just think about it and think that it's cool, you have to incentivize everyone. Not everyone gets the transition message or the local multiplier effect, but you can provide them with another reason why they should use this stuff. And then eventually over time, if you start driving the economic effects, then everyone gets it. But you have to incentivize people to start. Sterling backed is not the only way to go. So there are 4 local currencies in the UK that all have to be sterling backed. But there are many other models, some of which James mentioned. There's the time-backed model, so there are lots of time banks up and running in the UK as well, and that can be a good model depending on what you want to do. Then there are the so-called mutual credit schemes, which include LEPS schemes in the UK. There's also a lot of talk at the moment about the possibility of having things like energy-backed currencies. So why not take something like a kilowatt hour and base your currency on that? If we move to an age where we've got local energy production, for example, if transition towns can raise funding and build their own wind turbines, then that could be a very interesting one to go. So don't necessarily think that sterling backed is the be all and end all. Sterling is not particularly stable, as has been proven over the last couple of years. So why base your currency on something that's inherently flawed, perhaps? Be prepared for scepticism and suspicion all the way. We're talking about money, and there is nothing that gets people more worried and suspicious. It's a cultural thing as well. You'll find a very wide range of opinions and views of what money is and what money isn't. Be prepared for volunteer fatigue. So when the Brixton Pound launched, it had an immensely strong and committed bunch of volunteers. But over 2 years, we pretty much wore them all out. It's very important to start thinking about how you can staff a successful project. Do you need funding? If so, where's that going to come from? Because eventually you will run out of volunteers. Relying on the feel-good factor is not enough, so I keep going back to this thing, but you have to give people more than just a feel-good factor, because unfortunately, even though you really understand the ethics and why these schemes are a good thing, what you need to be able to do is to convince other people, and you can't necessarily convince them by describing a complex economic idea to them. So you have to get them on board using other ways. Sustainability, and by sustainability here I mean a scheme like the Brixton Pound. You have to make sure that it's sustainable in financial terms. So it's a great shame if a local currency scheme launches and it blitz of media attention, and then a year later runs out of any resource, it's exhausted its volunteers, and it finds it's crippled. So you have to think about a revenue stream, be that funding, using transaction charges or other charges on an electronic currency, or selling your notes for souvenirs. It's worked quite well for us in Brixton. You have to start thinking at the start, how are we going to sustain this long term?